I've lost track of how many times someone's asked me, hey man, is hitting each muscle 3 or 4 times a week the ultimate key to packing on mass, or is that just another passing fitness trend? The question hovers over every discussion about workout splits, but I still see plenty of people out there who've never tried anything beyond the classic International Chest Day on Monday, back on Tuesday, legs on, hopefully sometime soon. So let's dig into this idea of higher training frequency. Maybe 3, 4, or even 5 sessions each week devoted to the same muscle, and figure out if it genuinely supercharges your gains or if it can send you straight to overuse injury city. When people talk about training frequency, they're really talking about how many times you touch a muscle group in a single week, or even over a shorter cycle. The traditional model is that you do your big chest day, your big leg day, your big arm day, and you count on the leftover rest days to take the edge off your soreness. But it's become more and more common to see high-level lifters or advanced hobbyists experimenting with more frequent sessions for specific muscles, sometimes because they're targeting a weakness, other times because they just enjoy feeling that pump day after day. The logic is this: the more often you stimulate a muscle, as long as you can properly recover, the more often you might trigger that growth signal known as muscle protein synthesis, and the more total high-quality volume you can rack up over the span of 7 days or so. In theory, it's a pretty appealing approach. Instead of blasting your chest for 20 sets on a single Monday, where the last 5 or 6 sets might be half-hearted because you're wiped out, you could split that same total of 20 sets across multiple sessions. You might do 7 sets on Monday, 6 or 7 on Wednesday, and maybe another handful on Friday, which not only keeps your energy higher for each set, but also hits your pecs again just as they're recovered enough to take another beating. If you plan it right, you don't sit around for days on end letting your muscles twiddle their thumbs. You jump back in when they're fresh enough to handle another onslaught. But it's never that simple, is it? Because as soon as you up the frequency, you're faced with the challenge of letting your joints, your connective tissues, and your nervous system catch up. Muscles might be ready for action, but your knees or elbows might not appreciate the extra pounding. Let's imagine you decide to train legs 4 times a week. Monday might be squats and leg presses, Tuesday might be lunges and Romanian deadlifts, Thursday might be front squats plus hack squats, and Saturday you go for a bonus high rep session. That's a cool plan if your quads recover fast and your knees never give you trouble. But if you have a history of cranky joints, or if your squat form is not on point, or if you keep chasing personal records every single workout, it can backfire. You could find yourself dealing with tendonitis or lingering aches that never fully clear up, all because you're constantly battering that same region. And that's one reason a lot of smart lifters rotate the rep ranges across these sessions. Maybe Monday is moderate to heavy, Tuesday is super light with a lot of focus on form and contraction, Thursday is heavy again but with fewer total sets, and Saturday is more about pumping out reps in the 15 to 20 range. The variation in intensity lets your joints breathe a little, while your muscles still get hammered with different stimuli. You also have to consider your personal schedule. Even if your body can handle the extra frequency, your lifestyle might not. It's easy to dream about hitting the gym 6 days a week, but in reality, you might be juggling a day job, a relationship, kids, or other time-sucking obligations that make daily gym visits almost impossible. In that case, you have to figure out if higher frequency is truly the best route, or if you'd be better off settling for a moderate frequency, maybe 2 or 3 times a week for each muscle, and simply making those workouts count. If your schedule is tight, you can't just say, I'll add more sessions, because if you're cutting them short or rushing through because you're late for work, you might not get the quality that high frequency training demands. Recovery is another piece of the puzzle. Some folks have insane recovery capacity. I'm talking about those people who can squat on Monday, go for a run on Tuesday, hit squats again on Wednesday, and still feel fresh. If that's your body, you're in luck, but that's not how it works for most of us. Usually you give your legs a brutal workout and 2 days later you're still waddling like you just learned to walk. The idea of subjecting yourself to more squats that soon might make you question all your life choices. You can train yourself to adapt to higher frequency in some cases by starting with lighter sessions, fewer total sets, and gradually building up. You don't have to jump from a once-a-week split to a 5-day fiasco. The trick is to dial in volume so you don't cripple yourself. If you're used to doing 20 sets of chest on Monday, You might shift to 3 chest days per week, but keep each day to 6 or 7 sets. That way, your total weekly volume might end up even higher overall, but your daily workload is slightly more manageable. Over time, your body might thrive on that schedule, and your chest might start pushing through plateaus. If you recall some of my earlier content, especially the video where I dig into rep speed secrets, you'll see how tempo can affect the sustainability of frequent training too. If you're controlling your negatives and staying crisp with technique, your body doesn't accumulate as much random stress from sloppy reps. That means you're less likely to irritate tendons or cause muscle micro tears that never get a chance to heal. But if you're that lifter who loves to bounce the bar off your chest or jerk through heavy deadlifts in a half-controlled mania, adding more sessions is basically asking for trouble. You can't just ramp up frequency without first making sure your fundamentals are rock solid. The more often you train, the more times you're imposing mechanical stress on those connective tissues, and the more you need that stress to be stable and consistent, not chaotic. It's also important to realize that the difference between hitting a muscle once or twice a week and hitting it 3 or 4 times a week might not be night and day for every individual. Some people have done single split body part a day workouts for years and still built impressive physiques. Sometimes genetics play a part, sometimes technique, sometimes overall volume. It's quite possible that if you train chest once per week, but do it really well and progressively overload, you'll grow just fine. The reason many lifters gravitate to higher frequency is that they realize they can't keep piling more and more sets onto one single workout without diminishing returns. After set number 10 or 12, you're so trashed that your subsequent sets look more like you're flailing for survival than actually training your muscle effectively. So they think, okay, let's just take these extra sets and drop them on another day, so I'm fresh for them. It's a totally valid concept, and often it works wonders. But is it absolutely mandatory for everyone to train that way? No, it's more like a powerful option that might be better than your current approach, or it might be worse, depending on your recovery, your schedule, and your training style. Some people prefer minimalistic approaches, and they ride them all the way to 90% of their genetic potential without fussing too much about frequency. Others embrace a more advanced style where they keep inching up the training frequency as they get more experienced, figuring out how much volume and how many sessions they can handle. If that's you, or if you're the kind of person who just needs to spice things up in the gym, high frequency might be exciting and might be exactly what your muscle groups have been begging for. One approach is to take a weak point, say your biceps if they look like they belong to a string bean, and decide you'll blast them 3 or 4 times a week. Keep the rest of your training at a moderate frequency, but let that one muscle group absorb the extra attention. Often, that's enough to see a noticeable difference in size or fullness within a few months. Then you can rotate that approach to another muscle, maybe your shoulders or calves, whichever part needs that extra love. That's how a lot of advanced bodybuilders and fitness enthusiasts bring up 1 or 2 weak areas without letting the rest of the body lag. I know I mentioned earlier videos, and one I should remind you about is where I go over some of the best and worst arm exercises. If you're planning on doubling or tripling your arm sessions each week, you should absolutely consider which moves are easier to recover from. For instance, maybe you do standing barbell curls on day 1, concentration curls on day 2, and spider curls or cable curls on day 3. Each hits the biceps in slightly different ways, and it spreads out the stress so your elbows don't get hammered by the same repetitive motion day after day. Once you figure out a rotation of exercises that feels comfortable and promotes growth, you can sustain that higher frequency approach for at least a few weeks or a couple of months before your body starts begging for a deload or a break. That leads to another point. You don't have to stay locked into high frequency forever. Some people adopt it in cycles, doing maybe an 8 to 10 week run of hitting a muscle group more frequently, followed by a less frequent split for a while to let everything settle. Muscles can adapt quickly, but connective tissue often lags behind. It might be that after 2 months of increased frequency, you find a few minor aches turning into painful twinges. That's probably your cue to scale back, do some maintenance work, and let your joints calm down. After all, the number one priority is staying healthy so you can keep training year after year. It doesn't matter if you see a fleeting surge in gains for 6 weeks if you end up sidelined for the next 3 months with tendonitis or worse. I think the real moral of the story is to avoid being dogmatic. There's no single best frequency that works for everyone at every stage. Some guys get huge with a simple split, others plateau on that approach and need to train more often. Some days you might feel unstoppable and do a quick pump session for arms in addition to your usual routine. Other weeks, real life hits, and you can only make it to the gym 3 times total, so you do a more full body approach. As long as you're giving your muscles enough volume and intensity and you're letting yourself recover, you're miles ahead of the game. At No Fee Fitness, my philosophy is always about giving you the knowledge so you can experiment and discover what brings you results without draining your wallet. There's no entry cost for knowledge, so you might as well try something new. If your chest or legs have been stuck in a rut, a higher frequency program might be just the shakeup you need. On the other hand, if your current routine still delivers gains, don't feel pressured to ditch it just because you see some influencer training each muscle daily on Instagram. Always watch your form and pay attention to your body's feedback. If you're always tired, always sore, or noticing little injuries creeping up, maybe that new high-frequency plan is too aggressive. Dial it back, be honest with yourself, and find the balance between enough training stimulus and enough recovery time. If you do decide to go this route, maybe add 1 more weekly session for each muscle. See if that boosts your results over the next month or so. Track your performance, keep an eye on your mood and energy, and see if you're adding reps or weight to the bar. If you're trending upward, you might be onto something. If you feel like you're moving in reverse and everything hurts, no shame in cutting back again and calling it a lesson learned. The point is to keep the momentum going, avoid dogma, and build your best possible physique in a way that's sustainable and, above all, free from random nonsense fees and paywalls. That's the No Fee Fitness motto. You bring the effort, I bring the tips, and we meet in the middle to make real progress. Anyway, that's my deeper take on high-frequency training and whether it really stands above the classic split. Some people thrive on it, others burn out if they're not careful, but you won't know until you try. Just remember, consistency is king, recovery is queen, and your joints do not exist to be tortured every day of the week. If you want more specifics on technique, intensity, or rep speed, definitely go watch that earlier video I did on controlling your negatives and finding that sweet spot for rep tempo. One small tweak in how you lift can often make all the difference in whether you can train more frequently. Thanks for tuning in and sticking around for this longer talk. Hopefully it gave you enough depth to consider your own approach. As always, drop a like if you found something useful, subscribe if you haven't already, and stay on the lookout for my next piece of content. Until then, stay fit, stay free, and keep crushing those goals without paying a dime.